If you know quite a bit about the Nintendo 64, you're probably familiar with a game called Mystical Ninja starring Goemon, which debuted in Japan in 1997 and 1998 everywhere else, released by Konami. A platforming Zelda-like game where you play through a humorous version of Edo Japan, playing as the titular Goemon and friends. During the late 90s, two more Goemon games would come out, a Game Boy game with the same title and a Nintendo 64 sequel, Goemon's Great Adventure. After that, however, Goemon would never show his face again, outside of Japan. Goemon himself would have a total of 3 games with his name come out in the West, and of course not forgetting one of his Super Nintendo titles with The Legend of the Mystical Ninja. There he is not known as Goemon, but Kid Ying, with his sidekick Ebisumaru as Dr. Yang. Most of them stayed to Japan, where it turned out to be one of Konami's most lucrative franchises ever, spawning nearly 30 games. The first ever Konami Goemon game would be Mr. Goemon for arcades in 1986. However, the apex of the Goemon series would actually begin on home consoles, with Ganbare Goemon Karakuri Douchuu coming out only a few months later on the Famicom, and the game we'll be talking about today. Of course, Goemon was not a creation of Konami, but a video game based on Ishikawa Goemon, a real-life Robin Hood figure who, as expected, stole from the rich and gave to the poor during the Sengoku period. However, not a whole lot is known of the actual man, but managed to live on as a folk hero in many kabuki plays. A more notable thing about Goemon is that he attempted to assassinate Daimyo Toyotomi Hideyoshi, but failed and he was killed by being boiled alive. And to honor his legacy, he got an iron kettle-shaped bathtub named after him, called a Goemon Burrow. But to honor his legacy more, Konami would have him star in a video game about a fictionalized version of him. And it is a pretty great idea for a game when you think about it, and having Konami behind the wheel sounds like a product destined for success. And in my opinion, yeah. Ganbare Goemon Karakuri Douchuu is a pretty good game. Translating to Preserve Goemon, A Tricky Journey, this is yet another Famicom game headed by Kazuhisa Hashimoto, who is actually responsible for a lot of games we covered so far, most notably the first Goonies game and the NES port of Gradius. And since he was responsible for that port of Gradius, you know what that means. He was the creator of the Konami Code. Sadly, he passed away earlier this year in 2020, so to you Kazuhisa, this one's for you, as you ended up giving us one of the most ambitious titles released on the Famicom in 1986. Here you must play as Goemon, who must collect 3 passes found in hidden stairways, and then find the exit to advance to the next level. Along the way you can jump near these pots and presents that'll give you some extra cash, steak that'll make you run faster, or a Maniki Neko that'll upgrade his pipe to shooting at coins at enemies. I think one of the strangest things is that, well, Goemon was a Robin Hood-like figure who stole from the rich, but the rich in this game look like your average citizens, and when you knock them out they actually drop money. All except for the lady, who takes away money if you hurt her. So collect her instead. Collect a lot of her, and then get a harem going. So having a nice pile of money isn't so hard in this game. So what do you use the money for? Why, buying stuff, of course. Everything from health refills to one of the 3 passes you need just to save some time, to sushi that'll act as insurance if you run out of health, and extra armor for defense. If that isn't enough, there's other ways to spend your money, like actually gambling. Yeah, you can gamble in this game. Staying the night at an inn, and an actual dungeon crawling maze. I know I said I don't care much for dungeon crawling, but hey, this one actually has a map, and a goodwill message from your mom, so that makes it all the more better. Does Wizardry have that shit? I don't think so. I must say that Hashimoto and his crew really crammed a lot in this game. Like how some of the extra houses have people who just give flavor text, such as here where Konami advertises their games for you. Very classy, Konami. Thanks for the translation from Spinnerade and Friends on romhacking.net. And finally, what I think is the most amazing aspect of this game. Dude. Everything in this game has an outline. Like, this is easily one of the best looking games on the Famicom, and we're still technically in its early years, even though we're, 3 years in? The fact that Konami was able to pull this off and Nintendo hasn't, and won't for a while, means that Konami essentially one-upped Nintendo on their own console. Awesome! This game is filled to the brim with content and looks good at the same time. A+ on that effort. Yet, when you get into the gameplay itself is where things get a bit iffy. Not so much that I wouldn't recommend this game, but still, it feels pretty dated. For one, remember that I mentioned that you find the passes hidden in underground caves? Well, to find those caves, you have to jump in a specific spot on the map until a staircase appears. Ah yes, there's that 1986 trend I just can't stop talking about. Abstract progression. Let me guess, there's also no simple continue option, and you have to enter a button input to continue. What a surprise. Well, thankfully the hidden stairway issue is easily solved thanks to an item you can purchase in shops, which is the candle. While it eventually expires and leaves your inventory, for a short while every stairway is now visible on screen, saving you so much time. Until the shops decidedly stop selling them a few levels into the game. Oh, that's nice. I guess another real problem is this game sadly is pretty one-dimensional. I can accept that this is a game from 1986, and they still did a lot of great things, but in these town levels things just really blend together. You'll get lost in no time in the later level, and don't get me started on the underground sections you explore that can take you to a different part of the map or give you absolutely nothing. So while the towns are pretty bland, thankfully they do change it up a little bit in later levels with this mountain-like level and this level taking place near the ocean. Both in my opinion are even worse. Why is that? Well, despite changing up the appearance and looking so much greater in my opinion, these levels are now requiring you to platform, and platforming in this game just isn't fun. Especially when you can just walk down towards the screen too much and technically fall to your death. Or how about pressing down to avoid the enemies but then accidentally fall to your death because you went down too far? Like here when you're platforming across these land masses on the island, fish is flying everywhere, depth perception doesn't exist, and you see this part of the land that is cut off. You see that and think it's an area where you can die. But no, you can actually walk on it. Instead it's getting too close to the bottom where the death hitbox is so paper thin you'll end up losing a life and questioning what happened. There's enough in Ganbare Goemon 1 that I still do recommend it to an extent, but at the same time I don't really recommend getting far into it. It's the kind of game where you can play 4 levels and get all the enjoyment out of it from that. Still a great achievement for the time, even with some weirder parts like why does there need to be a time limit or the 2-player mode which is just you two taking turns, unlike the MSX2 version from a year later with actual co-op. But co-op on a single computer, really? Thankfully this won't be the only Goemon experience made for the Famicom, as Konami will make a sequel 3 years later in 1989, which I'm hoping takes what works in this game and make it better. Then a year later after that, Goemon goes RPG with Ganbare Goemon Gaiden, and then 2 years later with Ganbare Goemon Gaiden 2. Let's say Konami and Goemon treated the Famicom well. No, not well. Great.